The office was quiet, almost eerily so. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Steven Seagal walked in, calm but focused, expecting an important meeting with his executive team. He had appointments lined up, decisions to make, and yet no one had arrived. Not a single person. He glanced at the clock. 5 minutes late. 10. 15. For someone running a high-profile company, this was unusual. But Seagal was patient. He had learned the value of observing before reacting. Every second that passed, his awareness sharpened, the kind of quiet intensity that made people in a room immediately feel it. He sat down in his chair, fingers lightly tapping on the polished wood of his desk. Outside, the office buzzed with muted chatter, phones ringing, printers humming. But in that office, there was only the sound of time slipping away. Minutes ticked like tiny warnings. Finally, a knock at the door. The executives walked in, casually, chatting with each other, as if time had no meaning. They smiled, shook hands, and sat down, unaware that Seagal had been waiting, watching, assessing. Their attitudes screamed complacency, entitlement, a lack of awareness about the consequences of disrespect. Seagal didn't speak immediately. He leaned back in his chair, observing the group. His eyes were calm but sharp, almost predatory. The room suddenly felt smaller, heavier. Tension grew with every second of silence. He didn't need to yell. He didn't need to raise his voice. One look was enough. One small gesture, and the room could change forever. And then the audience realizes this isn't just about waiting. It's about accountability, respect, authority. Everyone watching knows something big is coming. What happens next will shock everyone in that office. And it's a lesson no one there will forget. Have you ever waited for someone who just didn't show up? How did it make you feel? The stage is set. The tension is high. Every movement, every expression counts. And in that room, the calm before the storm is about to break in a way that will leave everyone stunned. The executives settled into their chairs, laughing quietly among themselves, oblivious to the storm of authority sitting across from them. Steven Seagal's presence alone made the room feel charged, a subtle electricity that tightened the shoulders of anyone who dared underestimate him. But instead of snapping immediately, he observed. Every gesture, every glance, every misplaced smile or slight nod of entitlement went straight into his calculating mind. The clock ticked on, each second amplifying the tension. Seagal's fingers rested lightly on the desk, his posture composed yet commanding. His calmness wasn't weakness. It was the quiet before storm, a signal that this wasn't about anger or ego. It was about respect. And respect, he had learned long ago, was earned, not demanded. The executives, still chatting, failed to notice the subtle shift. Their casual attitudes, the jokes whispered under their breath, the assumptions that he was just waiting, all of it reflected a deeper disconnect from reality. To them, a delayed meeting was nothing. To Seagal, it was a test of awareness, integrity, and professionalism. He leaned forward slightly, the smallest motion that sent a ripple through the room. Eyes turned involuntarily toward him, and suddenly the casual chatter paused. Silence settled over the group like a heavy fog. The executives shifted in their seats, suddenly aware that the calm, deliberate man before them was not one to be underestimated. And then, the room felt even smaller. Each of them realized, late arrivals weren't just inconveniences. They were statements. And the message he was sending? Subtle, but deadly clear. Disrespect would not be tolerated. Seagal finally broke the silence, his voice low but unwavering. "I've been waiting," he said. One simple sentence, yet it carried the weight of authority. No shouting, no aggression, just a firm, unshakable statement of expectation. The executives swallowed nervously. Some cleared their throats. Others avoided eye contact entirely. Before we see what happens next, which country or city are you watching this from? Let us know in the comments. The executives' casual smiles had disappeared. Their casual confidence was replaced by unease. Every movement was calculated, every glance measured. The room was a pressure cooker, each second building suspense. And Seagal's calm, almost predatory focus made it impossible for anyone to ignore the tension. It was in this silence, this weighty anticipation, that the audience begins to feel it too, the subtle psychological trap. The story isn't just about a delayed meeting. It's about control. It's about authority, timing, and the unspoken power dynamics that define the corporate world. Minutes passed, each one stretching longer than the last. The executives' attempts at small talk were stifled. Laughter sounded forced. Even their phones, usually a shield from awkward tension, lay untouched on the table. Seagal's calm gaze pinned them like a predator sizing up its prey. And the viewers, watching from around the world, are now mentally trapped in a room with them. They can feel the tension, anticipate the fallout, and imagine themselves in the executive seats, powerless, exposed, and under the scrutiny of someone who doesn't bluff. The stage is perfectly set. The audience knows. The moment of reckoning is coming. One subtle word, one calculated move, and the balance of power will shift forever. The executives fidgeted in their chairs, glancing nervously at one another. The air was thick, charged with anticipation. No one dared speak. Every minute that Seagal remained calm, seated yet unyielding, the room grew heavier with silent pressure. The casual confidence they had walked in with was gone. In its place, unease, discomfort, and an unspoken fear that their actions had consequences far beyond what they had imagined. Seagal's gaze swept across the room, slow and deliberate, each glance pinpointing a different executive. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't make a dramatic gesture. He didn't need to. The simple act of waiting, with his eyes fixed and unblinking, was enough to make them squirm. Subconsciously, they understood that this was no ordinary boss. This was someone who expected respect, and he would tolerate no deviation. One executive finally cleared his throat, a weak attempt at breaking the silence. We had traffic, he stammered. Others chimed in with similar excuses. Minor distractions, scheduling mishaps, small inconveniences that would normally pass unnoticed. But Seagal's presence made every excuse feel inadequate, meaningless, almost pathetic. He leaned forward slightly, the tiniest motion that carried immense authority. Silence felt like a hammer. He didn't yell. He didn't accuse. He simply allowed the weight of his presence to speak louder than words ever could. The executives felt exposed, trapped under an invisible spotlight that revealed their lack of preparation, their disregard for punctuality, their arrogance. Every second stretched painfully. The tension was no longer just in the room. It was in the minds of the viewers watching. People could feel the weight of every silent pause, every measured breath, every subtle glance. They could imagine themselves in the same room, in the same chairs, facing the unyielding authority of someone who doesn't bluff. Seagal finally spoke, his voice calm, controlled, but sharp enough to cut through the thick tension. "This is not how professionals conduct themselves," he said. The words were simple, but the delivery carried decades of experience, discipline, and an unspoken warning. The executives shifted, unease evident on their faces. Some avoided eye contact. Others fidgeted, sweating under the mental pressure of accountability. If you were in this room right now, facing this kind of silent authority, what would you do? Would you speak up, stay silent, or try to explain yourself? Comment your answer below. The audience, now mentally in the room, begins to feel trapped. They start imagining every possible reaction, staying calm, trying to charm Seagal, or crumbling under the tension. And that's exactly what makes this story irresistible. It's no longer just about the executives. It's about every viewer projecting themselves into the scene, wondering how they would react when every instinct and social skill is tested to the extreme. Meanwhile, Seagal remained composed, a mountain of quiet power. He wasn't angry. He didn't need to assert dominance with noise or theatrics. Every subtle shift in posture, every pause in speech, every deliberate look was a lesson in authority. And the executives, now fully aware of the stakes, realized the gravity of their actions. The atmosphere was unbearable, emotionally, mentally, and socially. Each executive wondered if they had made the wrong decisions, misjudged the situation, or underestimated Seagal's control. The tension became almost physical. It wasn't just a waiting game anymore. It was a test of character, patience, and courage. And viewers around the world were now trapped in the same mental struggle, experiencing every heartbeat, every subtle shift, every nervous glance. By the end of part 3, the stage is set perfectly for the breaking point, the moment when patience gives way to action. Every viewer is emotionally invested, wondering, will Seagal finally speak? Will the executives survive the storm? The executives sat stiffly, each trying to appear calm, but their nervous energy was impossible to hide. Every second under Steven Seagal's gaze felt heavier than the last. The subtle authority in his posture, the intensity in his eyes, had transformed the room from a casual office meeting into a battlefield of accountability. At first, the executives hoped that someone, anyone, would break the tension. Maybe a joke, maybe a casual comment. But Seagal remained silent, unflinching. The room became a mirror, reflecting every misstep, every delayed arrival, every moment of arrogance. Even the employees outside the office seemed to sense the change in energy. Whispers floated through the hallways, rumors of something intense happening inside Seagal's office beginning to spread. And then, the moment arrived. A junior staff member, standing quietly near the door, glanced around nervously and muttered under their breath, "Wait, that's Steven Seagal, isn't it?" Heads turned. A few others murmured the same thing, their voices rising in disbelief. Steven Seagal? The Steven Seagal? The executives froze. Their confidence began to falter. They had known he was a figure of authority, yes, but the full weight of who he truly was, a globally recognized action legend, a disciplined force in both Hollywood and real life, suddenly hit them. Seagal remained composed, as always, but the room had shifted. The power balance that had been so delicately tense now teetered on the edge. The executives realized, with growing dread, that the man they had taken lightly was far beyond ordinary expectations of patience or tolerance. Seagal didn't speak immediately. He didn't need to. Recognition spread like wildfire, turning whispers into murmurs, murmurs into collective awareness. Every executive could feel it. The entire room now seemed smaller, charged with the hum of unspoken judgment. Yet even as recognition spread, Seagal stayed humble. He didn't leverage his fame or intimidate further. There was no bragging, no flash of celebrity power, no sudden explosion of anger. Instead, he let the moment linger, letting the executives fully grasp the consequences of their actions and their disrespect. The tension was almost unbearable. Every eye followed him. Every subtle shift in posture, every brief exhale became amplified in the charged atmosphere. The executives now understood that waiting, under his gaze, wasn't just a minor inconvenience. It was a test of character, of respect, of accountability, and the audience, watching from their screens around the world, was now pulled fully into the room. They weren't just spectators. They felt the mental trap, the rising dread, the impossible tension, the emotional weight of confrontation without a single word being shouted. Seagal finally leaned forward, his gaze sweeping across the room. He spoke quietly, almost casually, but the words cut deeper than any yell could. Respect is earned, not assumed, not taken lightly. The executives swallowed. Their mouths opened, but no words came. They were trapped, not by fury, but by the mental power of patience, presence, and recognition. Have you ever been in a room where someone's calm presence completely changed the energy? How did it feel? Share your story in the comments. The office felt smaller than ever. Every movement, every breath, every slight shuffle of a chair amplified the tension. The executives sat rigidly, their nerves frayed and attention locked entirely on Steven Seagal. No one dared speak. The weight of anticipation was suffocating, the kind that made seconds feel like hours. Seagal's presence alone was enough to command absolute focus. But he wasn't done. Not yet. He had waited. He had observed. And now, the time had come to act. He leaned back in his chair, slightly, fingers steepled. His voice was calm, deliberate, and unmistakably authoritative. You've all had your chance to show respect, to honor time, to conduct yourselves professionally. His words were measured, almost quiet, but carried a gravity that seemed to press down on every shoulder in the room. A few executives opened their mouths to respond. Small excuses, stammers, weak apologies. But Seagal raised a single hand, silencing them. There would be no discussion. There would be no negotiation. This moment was about accountability. He leaned forward again, locking eyes with each person in turn. I have been patient. I have observed. And I have reached my decision. The room fell into complete silence. Even the background hum of the office, phones, distant chatter, the occasional printer, seemed to fade into nothing. Then came the words everyone had been holding their breath for. Effective immediately, this executive team is dismissed. A stunned silence followed. The executives froze, processing what they had just heard. Faces went pale. Eyes widened. Some looked at each other in disbelief, hoping this was a bad dream, a mistake. But there was no mistake. The calm, deliberate authority of Seagal left no room for doubt. The reactions were instant. Chairs scraped against the floor as executives rose in shock. One muttered under his breath, "This can't be real." Another tried to argue, to protest, but Seagal's calm gaze stopped in mid-sentence. His presence alone had stripped the room of resistance. The audience watching the video felt the power too. Every second of suspense that had built up over the previous parts exploded into a cathartic release. They could feel the emotional intensity, the adrenaline, the psychological pressure, as if they were standing in the office themselves, witnessing the unstoppable authority unfold firsthand. Seagal's action wasn't about anger. It wasn't about revenge. It was about teaching a lesson. Respect is not optional. Discipline matters. Accountability is non-negotiable. And anyone underestimating authority, especially in a professional setting, would face the consequences. If you were in this office, watching someone take such decisive action, what would your reaction be? Shock, admiration, or fear? Comment below. And Seagal? He remained composed. He didn't gloat. He didn't mock. Every step, every word, every deliberate pause communicated a single truth. Power is most effective when controlled. Respect isn't demanded through rage. It is earned through presence, patience, and decisive action. For the viewers, this moment is a masterclass in psychological drama. The silent storm had finally broken. The tension built over waiting, observation, and silent dominance had reached its peak. The emotional and mental trap had closed perfectly. They had been anticipating the action, imagining themselves in the office, feeling the weight of the room, and now witnessing the payoff. The office was in stunned silence, but the ripple effect of what had just happened spread like wildfire. The dismissed executives scrambled to collect their belongings, their faces pale and expressions frozen in disbelief. The calm, deliberate authority of Steven Seagal had completely upended the dynamic in the room, and everyone present felt it. Some executives whispered hurriedly to one another, trying to make sense of the situation. Others simply stared at Seagal, still processing that a single, composed figure had the power to dismantle an entire team in moments. The air was thick with embarrassment, tension, and awe. Even the most seasoned staff members found themselves struggling to keep composure. And then the recognition hit. Word spread quickly among the other employees nearby who had been monitoring the unusual scene. "Did you see what just happened?" one whispered. "That's Steven Seagal. The Steven Seagal." The realization amplified the effect. The executives, already shaken, now faced not just authority but global recognition. Their embarrassment intensified. They hadn't just been fired. They had been humbled in front of a legend, a symbol of strength, discipline, and focus. Every misstep, every second of negligence, every casual assumption of entitlement was suddenly glaringly exposed. Seagal didn't need to shout or dramatize the moment. His calm, composed demeanor paired with the silent awe of everyone in the office, delivered the lesson far more powerfully than any confrontation could. He remained seated, unhurried, embodying the kind of controlled presence that commands respect without aggression. The executives understood instantly that this was a masterclass in authority. Meanwhile, employees outside the office, who had been drawn by whispers and curiosity, gathered to witness the scene. Cameras discreetly captured the stunned reactions. Phones recorded shocked expressions, and the atmosphere became a mix of chaos and fascination. The story had shifted. This wasn't just about being late or dismissed. It was about presence, accountability, and the psychological power of composed authority. Have you ever witnessed someone's calm confidence completely change the energy in a room? How did it make you feel? Share in the comments. Some executives tried to defend themselves, fumbling over words, but the reactions of those who had witnessed Seagal's composure made their excuses seem trivial. The lesson was clear: preparation, respect, and accountability matter. Composure can dominate chaos, and true authority doesn't need to be loud. It simply needs to exist. The audience, watching the video unfold, feels the mental trap fully. They are now emotionally invested, imagining themselves as either the executives, the employees witnessing the scene, or even Seagal himself. The story creates suspense, admiration, and tension simultaneously. It's a psychological ride. They feel every heartbeat, every glance, every moment of humiliation and awe. Seagal stood finally, not in anger, but in purpose. He walked calmly to the door, leaving a room forever changed. Staff and remaining employees were left in awe, inspired, and slightly fearful, understanding that a single moment of decisiveness can alter the dynamics of an entire workplace. The recognition, the chaos, and the lessons learned didn't stay in a room. Cameras, phones, and whispered stories spread rapidly, setting the stage for the story to go viral. The world would soon see exactly what happens when authority, patience, and composure collide with unpreparedness and disrespect. The office was quiet now, but the echoes of what had just happened lingered in every corner. The dismissed executives had left, faces pale and egos bruised, while the remaining employees whispered about the incredible display of authority and composure they had witnessed. Steven Seagal had not raised his voice. He had not shouted or made threats. Yet, in just moments, he had reminded everyone in the room exactly what respect, accountability, and leadership truly meant. Word of the event spread quickly beyond the office walls. Phones that had captured the stunned reactions were shared across social media. Clips went viral within hours. People commented on how Seagal's presence alone had created tension, held the executives accountable, and commanded respect. Many reflected on their own workplaces, wondering how they would have reacted if they had been in the same room. The story resonated emotionally and mentally. It wasn't about fame or power. It was about integrity, decisiveness, and composure in moments that truly matter. Seagal didn't gloat. He didn't seek recognition. He left the room with the quiet confidence of someone who understood that actions speak louder than words. His message was simple: accountability matters. Respect is earned, not assumed. And leadership is about maintaining composure even when others fail to do so. Do you think leaders should act decisively like this, or handle situations more gently? Which approach works better? Comment your opinion below. By the next day, clips of the event had spread globally. People praised the clarity, precision, and power of Seagal's actions. The executive's embarrassment became a cautionary tale about taking responsibilities lightly and underestimating authority. Meanwhile, employees, viewers, and fans alike were inspired by the calm but unstoppable presence of someone who could turn frustration and disrespect into a clear lesson on leadership. For the audience, the emotional journey reached its peak: suspense, tension, mental involvement, and finally, closure. They had been trapped mentally and emotionally from the first tick of the clock to the last word spoken. They had imagined themselves in the room, understood the psychological pressure, and witnessed the payoff. Seagal's actions left a lasting impression. It wasn't about punishment. It was about demonstrating that composure, discipline, and decisiveness carry far more weight than anger or shouting ever could. Leadership is about creating accountability and inspiring respect through presence, not fear. If you believe respect and accountability should be the foundation of every workplace, type respect in the comments and subscribe for more stories that teach powerful lessons in leadership and integrity. The story ended, but its impact lived on. Viewers reflected, employees learned, and the viral clips reminded the world that authority, patience, and decisiveness could achieve what chaos and aggression never could. Seagal had not just dismissed a team, he had delivered a masterclass in leadership.